The video that follows documents the funeral of Mr. Sawadogo, the chief diviner, or Baga, of the village of Dablo in northern Mossi country. Mr. Sawadogo was a good father, husband, and an excellent farmer, and a religious leader in his community. He was not Muslim, nor was he Christian. Best of all, he could speak to God. The Mossi believe in a creator god named Wainam, who is assisted by the ancestors of the family and village. The job of the Baga is to communicate with God through the ancestors. I met Mr. Sawadogo in 2004 and interviewed and filmed him. His performance and the interview are documented in my video, Speaking with God, a Mossi Baga diviner in Burkina Faso. Mr. Sawadogo passed away at the age of 78 in the fall of 2010. He was buried 3 days later. His funeral was held in the spring of 2011, when all of the friends and family could gather. The funeral begins with sacrifices on the old diviner's sacred shrine to ask the spirits of the ancestors to attend and participate in the honors for the dead. These elderly men are all diviners or Bagas themselves, some from Dablo, some from neighboring towns. They are gathering before the funeral begins to enjoy some snuff. The Baga's costumes are all fairly uniform, including decorated leather panels, lots of cowrie shells, numerous packages of magical medicine, and a mask that looks like the head of a giant bird. These are power objects or shrines. People used to call them fetishes, but that sort of term has gone out of use because it is so condescending. They are objects such as hoe handles that have been covered with magical material and the remains of numerous offerings, including millet beer, millet porridge, and animal blood. They embody enormous spiritual power which can be managed by the Bagas as they speak with the spirits.
Ce sont les préparatifs des funérailles du Baga de Dablo.
Among the Mossi and all other West African peoples, a funeral is a memorial service, held weeks to months after the death and burial.
Ce que vous voyez, ce sont les préparatifs pour démarrer la cérémonie. Lui, là, il va évoquer les ancêtres et c'est à la descente de ces ancêtres-là qu'on va faire le choix de celui qui doit remplacer le défunt. Donc lui, c'est déjà un Baga. Donc il va évoquer tout de suite là, par les danses, les ancêtres qui feront le choix du successeur du défunt.
You are about to see a Mossi funeral. Mr. Sawadogo died in October, and as everywhere in Burkina, he was buried within 3 days. The family then set the date for the funeral or memorial service. Formal funerals are held a few months or even a year after the death and burial, when all of the members of the family can attend, and when plenty of food has been collected. You can recognize who the Bagas are because they all dress in traditional clothing and wear hats. There are 6 Bagas here, including the spirit of the deceased, the Baga in costume, and 4 Bagas in traditional clothing and hats. I have enjoyed visiting Dablo for many years. I have lots of old friends there, including the elder blacksmiths, Razinga Zaksoba and Nwaga Bamago. In March 2010, I visited another of the Bagas, who appears in this video, and filmed his shrine and his use of cowrie shells in divination. I asked him if my wife Nora and I would enjoy long lives. He cast his shells and gave me instructions for offerings that would guarantee a long life. All Bagas, including this one, and the deceased chief Baga, are named Sawadogo.
Bakal gwamda hujir gwamda. Ya sama. Data mi apana ta apaka ni men yo wolumda. Ya kan na yelam to bo gumbo to. Ya gumum la pe te ma ni do. Man pe mi ya fon la.
Try time.
Ni Sokonga. Ni mande nungura na ji. Sokonga mande nungura na ji. Pai. Sokonga mande nungura ni. Ani. Abanda nama mahapoi. La yu fonda ti te yu manada. Patati. Patati yu manada. Gura. Gura na. Ani. Anu.
The two younger assistants in the foreground are carrying twabas, or power objects, what people used to call fetishes. The funeral honors the deceased and allows his soul to leave the village and begin its journey to the land of the ancestors. Although I refer frequently to the body of the deceased, this is symbolic because he was buried many months before the funeral was celebrated. The diviners break a large hole in the wall of the dead Baga's house opposite the door, through which the corpse can be carried, and the men and women of the family can leave. The Mossi are a gerontocracy. Elders are very highly respected. The elder Bagas begin to cut the new door, but within a minute or two, a much younger man takes the hoe and finishes the work. I've not carried my own bags in Burkina in 20 years. You will see several animal sacrifices. These are important because the spirit of the offering nourishes and honors the spirit of the deceased. The meat is then cooked and eaten by the villagers in a large feast. In a culture where few people can afford to eat meat, and many are malnourished, a funeral feast provides badly needed protein in their diets. Through the entire funeral, everything is done in threes. 3 is the sacred number of the male gender, 4 the number of the female gender. The Bagas circle the house 3 times. The funeral takes 3 days. A woman's funeral takes 4 days. This senior Baga inserts a long millet stalk through the roof of the house and sacrifices a chicken, pouring the blood down the stalk so that it touches the corpse of the deceased. As the blood touches the corpse, the ancestors choose the new Baga, the successor of the deceased. The new Baga is seized by the spirits and is carried out into the wilderness outside the village. He wanders there, hands behind his back, eyes closed, until the ceremonies are over, when he is carried back into the village by his sons.
Donc vous voyez le vieux là, c'est celui-là qui a été choisi par les ancêtres pour porter dans le futur la chefferie des Bagas. Comme vous pouvez le constater, il s'en va en brousse parce qu'il y a des fétiches qui ont été jetés dans la brousse par une tante de la famille. Donc il a comme mission d'aller et trouver ces fétiches-là et de les ramener. Comme ça, il marche les yeux fermés et les mains sur le dos, les mains croisées sur le dos, et il s'en va en brousse pour choisir, pour aller chercher les trucs là. Donc vous voyez, il est guidé par les ancêtres. Il ne regarde pas, il a les yeux fermés. Donc comme ça, il n'a pas le droit de revenir au village sans les fétiches. Mais il faut savoir aussi que les fétiches peuvent être partout. Quand la tante de la famille peut aller jeter ça n'importe où, dans un trou, sur un arbre, et il doit se débrouiller, toujours les mains attachées sur le dos et les yeux fermés, il doit se débrouiller pour ramasser ces fétiches-là avec les dents. Malheureusement, je n'ai pas le droit de le suivre dans la brousse, donc tout le monde l'attend au village.
Late in the afternoon, after all of the ceremonies he cannot attend are finished, the new Baga's sons carry him back into the village. He is exhausted, cold, and thirsty. Another Baga gives him millet beer, and he spits out a little to thank the ancestors. The diviners play iron gongs, 2 on each hand, which they strike with iron rings around their thumbs. This is the means by which they speak to the spirits. Their slow rotating dance is not intended to entertain. It is part of the conversation with the ancestors. Many more sacrifices of chickens and goats are offered on the dead Baga's shrine to free his spirit from the village so that it can begin its voyage to the land of ancestors. It is forbidden for others to see this Baga eat or drink, so his wife covers his face while he takes a drink of ram, or millet beer. The Baga calls out to the soul of the deceased, telling him to rest in peace. His son stands behind him in case he is possessed and falls. The Bagas are all assisted by their sons or grandsons, who will be Bagas themselves one day. Here the grandsons perform. The elder Baga's costume includes dozens of smaller power objects, bound up in leather packets covered with cowrie shells. On the morning of the second day, more sacrifices are offered on the threshold of the dead Baga's house, and the diviners dance again to ask the ancestors' help and blessings. These are the power objects which Abdoulaye Bamago refers to in French as fetishes, or fétiches. They are covered with the remains of decades of sacrifices.
Donc comme ça, ils sont en train de passer au cérémonial d'enterrement. Donc c'était... Là, ils vont passer au cérémonial d'enterrement. Donc ce que vous voyez là, avec ça, ils vont utiliser pour porter le corps. Donc...
This is the rack they used months ago to carry the body. Now they use it with a black and white funeral blanket to represent the deceased, although now it is empty.
Donc là, c'est la case du défunt. Donc là, ce sont les protocoles d'enterrement qui sont en train de faire. Tout à l'heure, le Baga a donné des sacrifices à faire pour éviter des malheurs qui allaient tomber sur le village. Donc, il a dit qu'il y a un vent violent qui allait passer dans ce village-là et semer des dégâts. Donc, il a demandé à ce qu'on envoie une chèvre et un poulet, bon, avec des spécifications. pour demander pardon aux ancêtres et voilà, pour éviter ce vent-là qui allait passer sur le village. Et ce qui est déjà fait. Donc la chèvre que vous voyez, la chèvre a été égorgée pour demander pardon aux ancêtres.
Through their dances, the diviners have discovered that the village is threatened by an evil wind that will blow death, disease, and accident through the village. They ask the ancestors to stop the wind and protect the village.
Ce sont les mauvais esprits qui sont en train de chasser hors du village pour pouvoir enterrer le défunt en paix. Les 3 calebasses de l'eau fraîche, de l'eau de farine appelée zomkom et puis de l'eau.
A woman brings the kupeogo, or funeral basket, that held gifts and materials that were used to prepare the body of the deceased Baga. Whenever the Bagas are communicating with the spirits, their grandsons stand behind them to catch them if a spirit possesses them and may cause them to fall. Through possession, the Bagas speak with the voices of the ancestors.
Voilà, appelé Picaro Amoré, donc c'est aménagé pour les Bagas. Donc, vous voyez, tout à l'heure, je vous disais que les calebasses, le canari de Dolo ne repartaient pas en famille, exactement. Donc, ça repart à la résidence provisoire des Bagas, qui sont venus pour assister, pour surtout faire les cérémoniales. Voilà. Donc, c'est pas dans la cour, mais c'est à côté de la cour du défunt. Voilà. Donc, on repart là-bas pour une petite pause. Et maintenant passer à l'enterrement. Tout ce que vous voyez, c'est juste les cérémoniales pour l'enterrement.
One of the most remarkable traditions among the Mossi and other people in West Africa are the joking relatives, or rakire. These are in-laws of the deceased Baga, who attend the funeral and insult, criticize, or mock the serious ceremonies. If invited guests each contribute 1,000 francs, the joking relatives contribute 1,000 peanuts. If the guests bring cola nuts, the rakire bring fried cakes, which they call colas, and claim they have imported from France. This is funny in part because cola nuts do not grow in France. The woman in the blue and yellow robe represents the dead Baga, while the woman in pink mimes the drummers.
Celle qui bat les mains, c'est le tam-tam, elle bat comme ça. Tu vois? Il y a une qui est habillée en homme. Elle représente le Baga de fond. Voilà. Elles disent que c'est une fête, qu'elles sont venues pour saluer la fête. Voilà. Donc vous voyez, c'est des beignets qu'elles appellent cola.
On the afternoon of the third and final day, the women of the Baga's family back into the dead man's house and then back out the newly broken door to prove that they were virgins when they were married and that they have been faithful to their husbands. The elderly Bagas do the same thing to prove that they are honest and virtuous. Only the pure are able to back across the body of the deceased.
Donc celle qui connaît, qui est sûre d'elle, qu'à part son mari, elle n'a connu un autre homme, peut effectivement venir passer par le trou, qui veut dire traverser la cage et aller sortir par la porte de l'autre côté, où est posé le corps. Donc en sortant de cette porte, tu es obligé de traverser le corps, ça veut dire... Donc, on rentre en reculant.
On the last day, the body of the deceased is carried through the village on a rack of wood poles covered with a black and white funeral blanket. The bearers dance with the corpse balanced on their heads. This honors the deceased. Of course, the rack is actually empty because Mr. Sawadogo was buried several months earlier. Under some circumstances, especially if the family is wealthy, a carved wooden figure takes the place of the corpse. Again, the blanket is actually empty because Mr. Sawadogo was buried in his grave months earlier, soon after he passed away. The men carry the body around the house 3 times. They then move toward the empty fields and repeat the dance several times. Finally, the power of the deceased diviner leaves his body and returns to the other diviners. At that instant, everyone runs away from the corpse so that the deceased cannot reabsorb some of his old magical power. The men of the family offer the final sacrifices near a funeral basket on the evening of the third and final day, bidding a last farewell to the spirit of Mr. Sawadogo, once the chief diviner of the village of Dablo.
Voilà. Donc, là, le premier poulet, on égorge. Mais les restes là, on n'égorge pas. On lui dit, voilà, il y a un tel, ton enfant ou ta femme ou ton neveu te dit de prendre ça pour la route. Voilà. Et puis, l'esprit du poulet suit et on ramène la chair à la maison. Voilà. Donc,